Welcome to More Than Miles. Whether you're on a run, driving, doing laundry, or cleaning your house, thanks for taking us along. On this podcast, we believe that our athletes are so much more than their body and sport. So we dive deep with conversations and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards, physical therapist, author, educator, and former endurance athlete. Through 12 plus years of successfully treating thousands of frustrated athletes and navigating my own health struggles, I've learned so much, and I really can't wait to share it with you.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Sinders. I'm a physical therapist, runner, and advocate for mental health and endurance sports. As an athlete myself, I understand the endurance athlete lifestyle and the impact that injury can have on our daily rhythm. I'm also known for my T-Rex costume and Wiggle Wednesday series on Instagram. Our goal is to always keep our athletes healthy on and off the road. As a wise woman named Pink once said, let's get this party started.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to More Than Miles. Tonight, I'm really excited because we have Steve Demoss with us. He's one of my good friends and the co-founder of Big Peach Running Company here in the metro Atlanta area. The Big Peach Running Company is a shoe store, and we recently heard you might be adding some cycling to one of the stores, which is really exciting. Steve is a runner, an avid cyclist, and just all-around athlete, and he's really great about getting people excited about being active in the community. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about him. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I always enjoy hanging out with you guys and sponging off of all of your knowledge and your fascinating discussions and questions. So it's a pleasure.
I have to say, I'm really sad that we're not, our listeners can't see the video portion of this because Steve has this great, really authentic Zoom background of running shoes, and they're real running shoes. It's incredible.
That's right. I sit in a stock room. That is my office, literally. No exaggeration.
Oh, it's great. I'm also a little sad we're not together in person, because once we get together in person, it can get really bad really quickly or really good really quickly, depending on how you put it.
We'll mark that down for a future date.
That sounds good. Well, let's start off tonight by just talking a little bit about your running journey, and let us know how you got into running and what kind of running you do now.
It's a good story, I think. I was not a natural runner. I was a swimmer, and my dad used to say I ran like I had a piano on my back. So I wanted to run. I liked the idea of running, but it was really hard and really very much of a struggle. And so I swam, and I swam, actually ended up swimming through 2 years of college. And so I swam a lot. And when I was 16 years old, I guess it was my junior year of high school, some friends were like, we should do a triathlon. I was like, yep, that sounds great. Let's do a triathlon. We just did it in the off season. I did it on an old Schwinn Varsity, which was probably close to 40-pound bike. It was a sprint triathlon out in Birmingham at Oak Mountain State Park. And in 1987, actually, I remember the first time I ran a mile as part of my starting preparation for that race. And it's funny, I was so proud of myself, 16 years old, running just over a mile through my neighborhood. Never mind that I probably just got done swimming a 4-mile workout. That didn't faze me, but the 1 mile running I was really proud of. So that was the start of my running journey. And, I tell people that if you do anything long enough, you will get better at it. I don't know if doesn't mean you're going to get good or fast or anything like that. But so we did a lot of triathlons while I was swimming, always in the off season. And then, once swimming was over, it was kind of like, well, let's do this triathlon thing more. I love the bike. I was slowly learning to like the run more and more. And then, as you guys can appreciate, life gets more complicated as you get older and you have more responsibilities and obligations. And running is just one of those activities that is really well suited to life.
Yes, it is.
Like swimming, I love swimming, but you have to have a pool. I swim in the air at home and my wife shakes her head and my kids will run and hide, but it just isn't the same. And, biking, it's like, if you don't get 90 minutes on the road, it doesn't really feel like you got in a ride. And I ride the trainer a lot still, and that's great. And especially with all the apps, so that helps, but running is just so darn accessible that as life got more and more complicated, I just found it was just easier to run. And of course, the more I ran, the more I liked running. And then the more I started exploring things with running, and the more I thought, oh, well, I should at least do a marathon at some point. And it was like, okay, that was fun. And then, on and on from there. And so that was kind of the journey. And so maybe for about somewhere roughly 10 years of that journey, I'll say I competed. We're all it depends who you compare yourself to. I always tell there's always somebody faster and there's always somebody slower, no matter where you are at on that spectrum. And so I don't really know exactly where I was on the spectrum. I liked to compete. I was mostly competing with myself. I went to some decent races and things like that. But I just enjoyed competing for about 10 years with a training program. And then, life just got really, really busy, and running was just there. And what it is today now is it's stress relief, it's meditation, an escape, right? It's escapism. It's a chance to sort of feel refreshed and revitalized, and I'm more productive and I sleep better and I'm a nicer person and all that. So it's like what running is to a lot of people, right? It's the same for me as it is. And it's just, I love running because it is so darn accessible. It's just sort of always there. The only thing you really need is probably a decent pair of shoes or maybe some decent running gear, but you don't need a whole lot else. And you can go any time of the year, any time of the day, on any surface, in any conditions, in any weather for the most part. And all those things, maybe there's little qualifications. Maybe you can't always go anywhere or any time of the day, but it's just really a versatile activity. So it has worked well for my life. And it's really become my primary activity after all these years.
That's how I used to feel. I used it for the meditation, for the escaping, for the just, making myself so tired that I couldn't think anymore. I love that about running. And so many people that we've had on the podcast so far have said the very same thing, especially now, like, gosh, I really just need it for my brain.
So I have a theory, and this is purely wild speculation on my part. And
these are my favorite.
These are the kinds of things you think about after, like 4 decades of running. It's really been in the last 15 years or so that I kind of said, you know what, if I just need to go about 45 to 60 minutes, I'm just going to commit to doing 45 to 60 minutes a day. And if I get more, great. And if, but try to do at least 45 to 60. After the 45-minute mark is where all the toxic thoughts and all of the stresses, and it kind of just washes away. And again, I mean, we're all an experiment of one, so we only sort of know our own world. But it's really like 30 minutes in, or certainly 20, 15 minutes in, I can be like, I'm just obsessing over all these little things, all these problems, how the world is out to get me and why everything is so bad. And somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes, you just don't care anymore. I could go into, maybe the evolutionary biologist perspective on why that is. And it's, that you actually, you're deep rooted in our DNA is fear, right? And so, which is why we survived all these millennia, right? And so without that, we wouldn't be here today. And we really don't have anything to fear. I mean, that's a broad statement, but in general, most of us don't live day to day in fear. I mean, our basic necessities are covered, but that part of ourselves that helped us get to where we are today still exists. So it still like hits that panic button of, this is a serious situation. And so, when the coffee's not right, or, you missed breakfast, or, something didn't go quite as smoothly with your workday at the start as you thought it did, like your brain goes haywire. And then I think when you get out and like somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes into the run, that part of your body that's like wants to focus on, that has to find something to panic about. Like your body, your systems actually start getting stressed enough that it focuses on a real problem of your body being in this state of stress. And it's like, oh, I have actually something to sink my teeth into. And so it somehow stops fixating on all these other things that it sort of goes to by default, because it's actually got something real to deal with. I believe that would be called bro science. Not real science necessarily. It's kind of a cobbled together hypothesis after listening to too many neuroscience podcasts and all kinds of things. So there you go. But I do feel like there's something weird about that 45 to 60 minute mark with running for me personally. And it may be different for everybody. And it probably is different for everybody. I feel sorry for the people that maybe it takes 2 hours to get to that point. And maybe I'm jealous of the people that maybe it takes 15 minutes for them to get to that point. They're like, it just takes me 15 minutes to get there. But for me, it's 45 to 60 and all that toxicity goes away. And it's like, okay, I'm calmed, I'm refreshed, and the world's a better place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I support that hypothesis. I almost always say that I don't always solve problems when I'm running, but I sure as hell don't create new ones, like mentally anyway. And so that's a nice vacation for me sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like weirdly productive too. Like sometimes I almost feel like it's been a catharsis. Like I get done and I'm like, wow, I'm so energized, so ready to get back to work, so ready to take care of and deal with A, B, and C. And then other times it's just sort of like average, right? Most of the times it's just like, oh, I just feel better. But sometimes it's like weirdly cathartic, where it's just like the world has literally changed in 60 minutes. Well, I don't totally understand why.
Well, I think it's because every type of exercise impacts the brain in a different way. And I can't remember the study. I have to find it. But there was a study I read fairly recently, and that means it could be 5 years instead of 1. I don't know at this point. But it was a study about which exercises impact different parts of the brain. And I can't remember exactly what running impacted, but it had to do with that kind of letting go, allowing you to relax part of your brain. It was talking about how if you have these problems, you should do this exercise. If you're type A and your brain is all over the place, you should definitely become a runner. And it was really cool. I'll have to look for it. I'm sure I won't be able to find it for the show notes, but if I can, I will put it in there and I'll send it to you, Steve. It was really interesting.
See, in like 20 years, we'll have that all dialed in. And with all the wearable technology or subdermal technology that we'll have, we'll just know exactly what we should do on any given day to sync up with our hormone levels and our and whatever other body chemistry needs to be addressed.
It's true. And I was really interested because it said yoga impacted this, weightlifting did this, cycling did, it was really cool. So I think we will be dialed in fairly soon, actually. I mean, I think the advancements have come so quickly.
Yeah, I think I say like 20 to 30, just because I think by the end of the decade, I think we're going to be close. So it's going to be a great time to be alive. I say that a lot. It doesn't mean that like everything's good. It just means that like there's a lot of exciting things, like some good exciting and some bad exciting. There's just a lot of crazy exciting things going on, and that is going to be a big area where it will be fun to look back and see how much ground we've covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, goodness, before we spend 4 hours talking about how much we love running. So Kate and I were chatting before the podcast, and both of us realized that neither of us knew the origin story behind Big Peach Running Company and how you and your business partner, Mike, started it. So can you tell us that story?
So in fairness, so you give me too much credit. I'm not a co-founder. Mike is the sole founder of Big Peach Running Company. Really Mike and his wife, because she put up with him.
Fair.
She's actually a big part of the reason I'm involved in Big Peach Running Company. So I have to give her a lot of credit. No, Mike founded Big Peach Running Company. He was working for the Coca-Cola company at the time as a account rep for the supermarket channel, and he traveled all over the country. And he was a wildly passionate runner. Like, you know, some crazy running stories. Like Mike's got some awesome, crazy running stories. And so he would go every place he would go, he would visit a specialty run shop. And Mike also, this is a little known fact about Mike, like Mike is passionate about retail. Like, I think he may be more passionate about retail than he is about running. I'm not as passionate about retail. I like retail, but I didn't ponder the world of retail constantly as I was growing up and thinking about my career. So Mike would go in to all these retailers and just study the way they did things, and basically concluded that there was a lot of opportunity in the Atlanta area, and so he went for it. And so Mike and I met though before he did that, and this is kind of a funny story. So it was I remember it because it was the year I did Ironman. I've only done one Ironman. I was one and done. I thought I was going to do many, and it just didn't work out. But it was 2001. I did Ironman Canada, and I was working for an ad agency or a marketing agency, and my sole client at the time was the Coca-Cola company. And so part of my job was to scour the halls for new business, right? And figure out who else needed our great expertise to help them solve their problems. So I was doing Ironman that year, and somebody said, "Hey, there's some dude like two floors down who is doing his first ever triathlon, and it's an Ironman. I was like, wow, that's pretty intense. I was like, oh, great. I mean, so, being the business development guy that I was like, well, that'll actually be a fun conversation. I won't have to, figure out what we're going to talk about. So Mike was always gone. So I would go by his office all the time, and he was never there. And then one Friday afternoon, I went by, I was like, wow, he's actually in there. So I stuck my head in, and I was like, introduced myself. I was like, so there's this rumor that you're doing your first ever triathlon, and it's Ironman Florida. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's right. I'm like, I mean, that's bonkers, right? Like who does that? And he's like, well, I was like, how are you feeling about it? He's like, well, I think I should be okay. I actually just finished Western States 100 a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, well, they should have included that bit of information. But, that's was and is a pretty fringe race. So, that fell off the radar. But yeah, so that's how Mike and I met. And, funny story. So the parent company for most of our stores is called Soap Creek Enterprises, and it is named after Soap Creek branch of the Chattahoochee National Recreation Area. And it was because Mike and I spent a lot of Sunday mornings, and I don't know, maybe other days too, but mostly Sunday mornings out running through there, just batting around tons of ideas about running specialty and a lot of research that we've been doing and about opportunity. And that's kind of how the partnership came to be. But that was, and so I got involved officially in 2005, but the original Big Peach running company store opened in Brookhaven in 2004.
So I actually met Mike, I think I think Brookhaven was the only store there was when I first went to PT school, and I might botch it because I can't remember when I started PT school, but it was right around 2005, I think. And I met him at a coffee shop in Brookhaven randomly. And I don't even know how. Like, he had long hair pulled back, And we started talking about running, of course. And then I put two and two together that he owned the store that I was getting my shoes in.
Oh, nice. Well, it's funny if you look at some of the older pictures of Mike, he's like super clean cut. He was, he was an account guy at Coca-Cola. He can only have the long hair and all the facial hair. It doesn't. Maybe you can nowadays. I don't know. Not back then.
I think it's a little bit more relaxed now, but I don't know. I'm not in corporate.
Right. I've still got some friends over there, so I should ask them.
You should ask them. So you joined him and you left your advertising job. And then what did you do? Like, what's the part of your partnership for the company?
My part of the partnership is that I opened the Marietta store. And that was, now I won't go into like the business.
Yeah, no. I don't need to know
because they're boring, right? I mean, but it is a partnership, and I opened that, and of course we have it's mostly a handshake agreement. In fact, it's like 99% a handshake agreement. But it's worked well so far. That was the initial phase with the idea of, well, who knows where it'll go from here. Let's see if we can even do this, right, and make this work. And I went for it. I mean, at the time we had I got to get my timeline straight. So I had my son was about 5 years old, just shy of 5 years old. And my daughter was about 1.5. She was 1.5. And like, that was it. Like so fear is a great motivator, right? So
yes, it is.
So that was a good way to get real motivated and committed to figuring out how to make it work. And, from there, I mean, we just slowly evolved into getting into other projects and opening other stores and getting into Mike is the wild man. I mean, he is a wild man, right? Like in all senses. I would say that like, he's not like, I say that like lovingly and respectfully, yes. Because he's got, the crazy vision and he's the real entrepreneur. I am much more of a grinded out. I will be there every single day, and I will slowly, steadily just keep on working on things. But, it's gone well, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think really the vision, the way Mike and I hit it off is I think he had been able to articulate something that I felt deeply about, but hadn't maybe realized how deeply I felt about it or hadn't been able to articulate it. And that was just the idea of promoting and growing the pedestrian active lifestyle, which is, it's great. It's not the running lifestyle, right? It's not the running and walking lifestyle. It's the pedestrian. If you like using your feet to move forward, then our job is to inspire you and help you go wherever it is you want to go, and maybe hopefully introduce you to some new dimensions along the way. And that was really, really attractive, I think, for everyone, right? So everyone who's passionate about this lifestyle, that is an attractive proposition, because when you really boil it down, like that's what we want to do. We want to share our passion and enthusiasm for this with other people. So with the hope that it will help them improve some small facet or some huge facet or aspect of their lives. And so that was the attraction. And I think that's what attracts a lot of people to Big Peach Running Company who want to work there, is that opportunity to kind of make a difference in the world, and it's fun.
Yeah, I think using that word lifestyle, I think, is what really attracts, like brings the emotion to it, right? And so, because runners say like, hey, like these people are going to understand me and what I do, because they understand that this is a lifestyle and not just a sport. Yeah, it is. So Mike had coined, which is a great tagline, if we have a tagline, which we do, but we don't really promote it that much, but it's may your best miles be those covered on foot, which is like brilliant. That me being from the ad agency that I was and writing a lot of copy, I was like, oh, well, surely I could make that better. And the answer was no, I couldn't, because it's already brilliant. And it like sort of sums everything up perfectly. But I came back with, it's a lifestyle. Which Kacy, you're right. Like it is. It's just, it was not nearly as good as the may your best miles be those covered on foot. So I had to concede that was the better of the two.
Well, when I was in PT school, I applied for a job at your store and didn't get it.
Are you serious?
Oh, that's funny.
Well, to be fair, it was in Decatur and I was going to have to do some clinical rotations. So I think they needed more coverage than I could offer. But I think it's very funny now because I was devastated.
So that is funny. I've got to say, one of the things we have strived to improve over the day. Like, I mean, so let me just preface this too by saying, like, Mike and I were in our mid 30s. Like, Mike was in his early 30s when he embarked on this. I was in my mid 30s. And like, I mean, I don't know, like there was a lot of wild stuff. Like the way the business was run then versus the way the business is run now is dramatically different. I think the passion is still there, but I think sometimes the passion almost gets muted as you get bigger, right? Because you have to have a certain amount of process and procedure, because I mean, we learned the hard way. We tried to do it without any of that. I mean, we tried everything. And I mean, we had some really out of control stories, which are awesome stories, but, also, not stories that you would share. So one of the areas where we needed to improve was the way we hire people and or look at just make sure that everybody gets properly. So I'm going to say that you slipped through the cracks simply because of our process on our end, which was questionable at best. And I will throw this out there. So, Kate, whether it's you or Kacy or Ryan, if you ever would like to work at Big Peach Run, you're more than welcome to submit an application, and I will, Mike and I will personally make sure that it works out.
Yeah, will you pass it through? Can I get through the levels?
Right, yeah. We've got a better process in place.
That's all right.
I want the personal interview process.
Yeah.
It's a funny story. Well, I do sometimes, it's always super humbling. Like anytime somebody wants to come work for an organization that you're a part of. And the very least we would owe anybody is a response, and a thoughtful response as to, what next steps might be, or why maybe there's not going to be a next step, but a thoughtful response is the least we can do, because it's super humbling. Anytime anyone submits an application.
God, I absolutely agree, because looking for people to work once now that having a company and trying to hire physical therapists. And I agree. I've met so many incredible people. Not everyone's a good fit, but it's been great to meet so many people. And I'm always grateful for them coming to me and talking to me about it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no doubt there's been a lot of great people who probably have you just slip through the cracks for whatever reason. The other thing that is a struggle for me personally is we have about 110 people in our organization, and we cycle through about 30-ish people a year, but for good reason, right? I mean, people are working part-time on their way to doing something else, and it's a great opportunity for them. It's a great thing for us, but I don't get to know that many people, right? Yeah. Like there's so many great people that are in our organization that you can't, that was one of the hard things as we were growing, was just sort of acknowledging that, right? Like I can't get to know all the great personalities and as I would like to, but it's a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. I mean, it's interesting. We just hired somebody for our Atlanta office, and for the first time ever, I am not doing the onboarding. Ryan's doing everything. Oh, and wow. She's even starting while I'm in New York. And I was freaking out about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the first time, but I understand we're not going to ever be as big as you are because we're a small, practice, but that whole taking a step back and kind of passing the torch in some areas has been a really interesting process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always an adventure.
It sure is. Okay, so let's get down to some of the questions that the audience might care about.
Oh, not just right.
What we care about.
I was going to try to pivot real hard, and I was like, I've already done that once in this interview. Like, it's Kate's turn.
No, I can totally do it. Like we said, if people are enjoying this, they can listen to it 2 times instead of just one. It's okay.
We have to hire an editor after this one.
We have an editor.
Thank God.
He's very helpful, but hopefully
thanks, Barry. We appreciate you.
He's going to hate this episode.
But this is something that was really interesting to me, and I love to talk about, is the history of running shoes. And again, this can be a topic that might take us 3 hours. So we'll try to, tone it down a little bit. And I love that presentation that you did. And then also the one you did in the store for us most recently about kind of the 3 pieces of running history. And you broke it down into 3 points where things really changed for running shoes.
Yeah.
But I would like to go over that because as runners and as people that buy shoes all the time, we're not really necessarily aware of all the changes that happen and how quickly they happen and why they happen. So if we could just start there and then kind of move forward, that would be great.
Yeah. So well, let's go the 3-chunk approach to it. So you had the running boom. Well, so you had I'm going to go 3.5. You had pre-running boom. We're not going to talk pre-running boom, right? So shoes were fairly minimal. They were built for speed and a tiny, tiny bit of comfort, but mostly for speed. Like everything was about going something to make you go faster and protect your feet just a little bit. The running boom in the 70s was really the first thing. And of course, you have to look at this. It's an economy, it's a market, right? So you have, and it's business. And so when you have an uptick in participants and you are a footwear manufacturer, there is an opportunity, right? So you can almost picture yourself, if you're a national sales director, you're like, we've got to grow. And you're like, great. And you're like the director of footwear. And you say, okay, well, we've got to grow. Where do you look for grow? Hey, this running thing is taken off. Why don't you go look at running and see what's going on there? Okay, so I'm going to go look at running and say, well, what's going on in running? Okay, well, we've got these manufacturers who are already here. Okay, that's what they're doing. How are we going to be different, right? So then you start saying, okay, well, what's going on with runners? And it's like, lo and behold, they were getting injured. I know, right? That's
shocking.
so it's like, we're getting injured. And so I kind of look at it, you hire like a podiatrist or somebody who knows maybe like anywhere from a little bit to a lot bit about human mechanics. And you basically say, look what's going on. It's like, oh, hey, everybody's, landing in this way. And it looks like there's a lot of force on their knees and it looks like their foot's doing some strange things as it rolls through and pronates. And so the first, the shoes coming out of the 70s were really built it was the early stages of providing a little more of a stable platform and to sort of slow down or control the motion of the foot to some degree, probably to a far too much of a degree. And then to provide some cushion, right? Some protection. And so that was sort of the first step towards what we would call the traditional running shoe today, right? That offers, a pretty good support at midfoot, more protection on the heel. You have your classic drop from heel to forefoot and your certain height off the ground. And the way it fits with roomy toe box and snug midfoot and snug heel and these things. It all was sort of initially hatched back in the 70s and then evolved through the 80s and through the 90s. And really even in the 90s, it was just sort of like more is better, right? It's like we're just, and you know, with the everything. Idea of visible technology, and it's like all doing the same thing. It's just more and more and more, right? And even into the early 2000s, and when Big Peach was founded, it was still, if you looked back, it's like, yeah, it's evolving. But there wasn't any the word disruption is just used so overused. It's becoming one of my least favorite words, but I'll say nothing was turned upside down and scattered all over the place until really late in the 2000s. And lo and behold, the barefoot movement came
Born
through,
to run.
Born to run. And it's such a strange confluence of events that is utterly unpredictable, which is why it's such a brilliant story. So, we had met with the folks from Vibram Five Fingers. I'm going to make up some dates because I can't remember. Like, we meet with people all the time, right? So let's just say it was 2007 or 8, right? And, they've got this, the Five Fingers shoe, and they're pitching it to us as a running shoe. And I'm just thinking, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I don't understand. Like, how could anybody see this as a running shoe? And, shame on me. Like, I've learned a lot, if nothing else, over the 15 plus year journey I've been on. I've learned a lot of humility. And this is one of the moments where, I just should have been much more open-minded than I was, but I didn't get it. And it didn't really make sense based on anything we would have thought. But lo and behold, Born to Run comes out as the bestseller, hits the New York Times. And now, all of a sudden, Vibram Five Fingers, like, we're trying to track them down. Nobody's returning my calls. And I'm like, what is going on here? You got people pouring in looking for Five Fingers, and they're going to become these great runners. So, and it turned out, it's kind of like, I'll liken it to the pandemic a little bit, right? So, in March of 2020, nobody knew what to expect. Like, nobody knew, like, what is the rest of the year going to look like? What is April going to look like? What is 2021, 22 going to look like? Like, is this, like, what the heck is coming? And that was kind of like where it was when the barefoot movement was at its peak, which would have been around 2010. And it was like, wow. I mean, there was a large faction that just thought traditional running shoes were gone. They were never coming back. We were all going to be running barefoot. And in hindsight, it was a blip on the radar that left a huge legacy. But the shoes themselves didn't really stick around all that long, as it were. I mean, it was like 2 years, right? Maybe a year and a half, really, where it was at its peak. But the legacy of the barefoot movement is that it really did, for the first time in a long time, cause people to really question the way shoes were being designed and question a lot of the tenets that had been born really back in the 1970s, and say, is there a better way to do it? And that's a great legacy coming out of the barefoot running movement. Another great legacy coming out of barefoot running is the fact that we started thinking about running form
and research. Yeah.
Oh, hey, it's not just the shoe that can make you into a more efficient runner. It might be one or two other things, which is really where we get into your wheelhouse, right? And
yeah. And that was where all the research started. I mean, that's when it was right at the beginning of my PT career, I guess. And I was like eating up all of that research. And it was like constantly, well, is it better to be a barefoot runner or not? What does a shod runner look like? And how does that change the form? And it was so exciting and so interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of the legacy of barefoot. And look, there's people that can run barefoot, no doubt about it. Most people can't run in a minimal or barefoot shoe, but there are people who can, and that's fantastic. But the legacy was not that it changed footwear, like it eliminated the traditional shoe, but it did cause a lot of people to really think about things, including running form. Interestingly, at the absolute peak of the barefoot movement, there was a shoe that came out called Hoka. and Hoka, I'll remember Hoka. So I have a good friend of mine.
So bold at that time, really.
So bold. It was. So I remember reading about it. I read about it in some industry publication. It said it's a maximalist shoe. And this is when minimal was like the absolute coolest thing to be. It was like, this is a shoe that embraces maximalism. And I remember looking at it and thinking, God, that thing is ugly.
So
and
ugly.
I actually still have, in fact, I will, nobody can see this. This is the original Hoka, right?
Oh,
right.
I have a pair of those.
Yeah, nice. So I had a friend of one of my best friends who I still run with every Friday morning. He was at a store, a special run store he had worked at for a long time up in Michigan. called Playmakers, and they were the first store in the U.S. to bring in Hoka, and they're really a visionary store. They've got some incredible people that have and do work up there, and he brought a pair back for me to try. And I remember running it in the park. I remember lacing up thinking, I hope I hate this thing. I hope it's terrible. The last thing we need to do is get confused by this. I remember running in it and thinking, wow, that's different. That's something else. And so, that was kind of, the birth of Hoka. And, Hoka was embraced, of course, immediately by the ultra running community. And as the barefoot trend faded away rather quickly, Hoka accelerated slowly. It took a lot of getting used to. I mean, it was not, I mean, their manufacturing process and their distribution system was an utter disaster. I mean, it was really just tiny little company that was based in France. I mean, when we called them to get an account, their founder answered the phone.
I love that.
So yeah, it was great. Mara's law usually refers to the world of technology. It says that big changes are usually overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term. And I think that's a perfect way to look at both barefoot and Hoka to some degree. Hoka's impact initially was one of confusion, but for the people who maybe, were really doing the longer running, it was quick adoption and a lot of excitement and a lot of buzz, but nobody saw what was coming. And that is to say, they've really revolutionized the industry. And it's in the 15 plus years that I've been directly involved in this, and the years of, all the years before that, we've borrowed from all the great thinking and the great work of so many people before us. This is, in my opinion, easily the biggest change as far as turning the industry upside down and really revolutionizing it. And it's not to say that Hoka's got all the answers, because they don't. In fact, I actually think there's a lot of manufacturers that are doing things at least as good as what Hoka's doing. But as far as just really thinking originally, they really were the ones that did that. And if you look at a lot of the trends today, you just can't help but see the Hoka DNA all over the place. And we can go into that if you're interested, or we save that for another time. But that is the impact that they've had is huge. So you've really got those three buckets, and it's fun because if you say barefoot really launched in 2009. I mean, it's only 2021. Like, the amount of change in the last decade has been mind blowing, and it's great. It's so great. There's never been a better time to be a runner for so many reasons, right? I mean, it's just the expertise, the knowledge you have access to, the products you have access to. It's just brilliant. So it's been a breathtaking last decade, and I think it's going to be at least as breathtaking for the next decade. But who knows? Maybe it'll be boring. I don't know. I hope not.
Doubt it. I do not think it's going to be boring.
I think our days of the ho-hum boring are pretty much over at this point.
Yeah.
So tell us, I mean, we don't need to do this another time. Let's do it right now, about what's going on now in the stores, and kind of because what I want people to know is I want them to be able to confidently walk into a running store. And if they walk into yours, they're going to get a lot of education anyway. And the people that you hire, they're very good. But what if they don't have access to a big Peach running store or a specialty running store, and they're just trying to buy a pair of shoes? Like, what should they know about the market and what's going on now?
So just in general, if they say, well, really, we always tell people we tell people we're brand agnostic, and we say they should be as well. That the only thing we're loyal to is the foot. And so, as you sort of progress in your journey, whether ideally when you're starting off, but it gets easier the more you've done this, whether you're walking or running, but it's to really know what your foot likes, right? And, like you said, for somebody who's starting off and doesn't have access, like, how the heck should I know what the foot likes? But in general, you want a lot of room for your toes to really spread out and be free. You want a nice, snug fit at midfoot and a nice snug fit on the heel. Now, snug being defined maybe as a gentle hug instead of a bear hug. And there's room for personal preference in here, right? So I'm speaking in generalities. But if you say, well, how should a running shoe fit? Because a lot of what we do, because we see so many people that are, especially in the last year and a half, right? Where it's like, I've never walked so much, or never been on my feet so much, never been outside so much, never run so much, and my feet just hurt. Help my feet stop hurting. And you look, they've got some poor shoe that offers no support, little protection, probably doesn't fit right. So many times we end up going up a whole size, maybe more in shoes. So it's really just saying, listen, our job is to educate on the basics. That's how a shoe should fit. Lots of room for the toes, snug midfoot, snug heel. the second consideration is, how does it feel underfoot? And we could get all into the weeds here, and I love getting into the weeds, but like, it's actually, you get so far into the weeds that you realize that for every question we answer, there's 500 questions that come up.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And it's just so like true. It's like a Greek mythology thing of just like this impossible task. It's like something that just grows exponentially, and you cannot answer all these questions that come at you. So the way out of that is, and it really goes back to, interesting, a study that, I know you guys are familiar with, from 2001 with I think it was out of Calgary. I can't remember if it was the University of British Columbia, but Ben O'Nig, right? And came back with this, $1 million research study, roughly 10,000 subjects, and trying to figure out what is the right shoe. And the conclusion can be either maddening or relieving, depending on how you want to look at it. The maddening side of it would be like, seriously, so your answer after all that is the best shoe for you is a shoe that feels right on your foot. It's like, that just seems so disappointing. But in our world, it's actually a huge relief, right? Because you just can't possibly answer the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands, whatever it is, questions about each individual body. And so really, but if you can listen to your body knows in general what is going to work for it. And so putting a shoe on, I would say to anyone getting into it, and just try, you've got to try the shoes on. You've got to make sure they fit correctly. You've got to make sure they feel correctly. You say define feel, and I would define it by saying smooth. If we had to use one word, and from that point of contact to when you propel yourself forward, you should feel like you're gliding along. In a perfect world, it should feel like the shoe is helping propel you forward. And that means that it is probably complementing your biomechanics as they exist today. And that's probably where we should be today. And I say words like likely and probably and things like that, because there's no doubt. The only way you know for sure is you've got to go out and run it 2 or 3 times, right? I mean, then but you can try it on and run back and forth in Big Peach or any other store as many times as you want. You don't know for sure until you get out into the field and put it to a real test. But those are the indications. You've got to make sure the fit style, then you can't compromise there. And the shoe that feels smooth and natural and almost like it's propelling you forward is usually the right answer for you. And there's subtle differences, right? I mean, to a certain extent, if you've got some, $50 shoe that you've had for 8 years and it's falling apart, like you can throw a dart at the wall in any specialty run store, and whatever you hit is going to be a massive upgrade from where you're at today. And so it's like a lot of times it's like, you just be like this is going to be real low hanging fruit, but it does get a lot more complicated than that. And that, that's our job, is to work through the complications. But really the guided, for us, it's a relief. It's like, rather than figuring out all those questions, we can say, listen, stay simple, listen to your foot, give it a run in the store. Which one feels like it moves more naturally? Which one feels smoother underfoot? And it really goes back and ties in with a lot of the current research about what will work best. But it also leaves so much unanswered, right? Because it's hard to believe that in 2021, with all that we have, that is our answer, right? But it is. And there's a lot of tools, like we do video analysis. We're going to look at your feet. We've got a number of toys, and they're great. And I know you guys do a lot of the same thing, only you have more toys. But you just can't hang your hat on what you learn from any of that analysis. There's too many unknown variables, and so you really do end up going back and saying it's our body. I mean, we did a thought exercise internally, the 4 levels of complexity of the fit process. And, I love these thought exercises. Like, I listen to these things on science channels that take these crazy complicated subjects and boil them down and you have elementary school, high school, college, and graduate student level, right? Of complexity of a subject. And so we applied that to our fit process. Of course, when you get into the graduate level, I'm not really sure I'm capable of speaking at graduate level, but let's just pretend I am for a second. And, you get into things like, you get into, shin tibia rotation and how that impacts the knee and the hips and all these different things. And you end up sort of throwing your hands up and being like, I don't know where to go, which I have a lot of empathy for you guys and what you do, because that's where you've got to live in that area. For us, we default back to the elementary school level, because even the graduate school level does not do a very good job of answering the questions. And at the simplest, we tell people, my job is to tell you how a shoe should fit and feel. Your job is to listen to your foot. And then our job together is figure out what in the heck your foot is saying. And that's our fit process. And yes, we have some tools and toys that can help us along the way, but that's really it at its simplest. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, we liken it to, what is it? The wand chooses the wizard.
Yes. I just watched
the wizard, Harry.
I just watched that yesterday with my son.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, no, he loves it. So I actually saw that scene yesterday.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. So I'm glad you get that. Sometimes I'll tell that to people and I get a blank stare. I'll be like, oh. Well, if you don't get that, then it's not very funny.
No, it's not. That study from NIG actually was so helpful to us as well. And the reason that it was helpful to me personally, and I don't know about you, Kacy, is because I would get people with bags of running shoes coming into my office asking me to watch them run in each shoe. And then they would want me to give them exact reasons why I should pick the heel toe ratio of 12 versus 8 versus 2. And then it would be like, well, I want this motion controlled shoe or I have this motion control shoe, but now I want this neutral shoe. And I mean, it was awful. Like I had no answers because we didn't know anything. The best thing I could say, and my favorite thing to say is, well, does it feel good? That's the one. That's the one you should pick. And I used to I still send them to you guys, but I'd be like, why don't you go into Big Peach and they can help you with the shoe part. And then I would call someone from the store and be like, hey guys, so this is all I care about. Really, it matters how it fits, but this is what the patient really wants to know about. It's complicated.
We can make it as complicated as we want. I think we can really get into the weeds with this, but I do find the simplicity of comfort being more helpful than harmful in most cases. And so Steve, I'd be interested to hear, is this why the maximalist trend has kind of grown? Because they're comfortable, right? Like all this cushion, it feels great.
Yeah. So it's great. Like, you know how they say, if you have to explain your joke, it's not a very good joke.
Yeah.
So if I have to
about the delivery, Steve, all about the delivery.
if I have to explain minimalism and barefoot to you, then it's not going to work. I've really never had to explain maximalism to anybody, right? If you show them the shoe, they're like, oh yeah. Yeah, that looks like where I need to be heading, right? I mean, it's like, it's so simple to understand. It's like, look, we're just going to throw a whole lot of foam underneath your foot. We're going to rocker the midsole so it doesn't feel like you're walking or running in soft sand. And, we're going to get the fit, somewhere between good and great, hopefully. And, people put on, they're like, wow, it feels like the shoe's moving me forward. It's almost like I'm running downhill. It's like, yep. Do you think you like that? It's like, I'm going to keep them on my feet and I'm out of here. Yeah. So, and, minimal, it was like, so tell me why this is supposed to be better for me. Like, and then you get into having to say, well, look, if you change the way you run and you land less here and more there, shorten your stride, you're going to decrease the ground reaction forces. And like the eyes gloss over 10 seconds in. And you bring out the shoe and you're like, here's Kacy, here's a whole lot of cushion underneath your foot. I know it looks strange, but put it on. Tell me what you think. And you're like, wow, that feels comfortable. It's like, is it really that simple? It's like, yeah, for now, it really is that simple. Now, having said all that, there is such a thing as too much cushion. Mm-hmm. Like I saw a cartoon a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a few months ago, and it was great. It was a guy doing the 100 meters, and he was in a shoe with 100-meter high stack height. The guy went off and he falls down, he crosses the finish line, right? And it's like, so it's sort of pointing out that there is obviously a finite limit, or there's a limit to stack heights and the amount of cushion that you will have underneath your feet. And it's interesting. There's two trends that we're kind of watching. It's interesting. So so-called neutral shoes are becoming very stable. Like they're like really stable, supportive shoes these days. A lot, not all, but there more and more of them are heading in that direction. And the so-called stability, or what used to be called motion control shoes, are getting closer to having more of a neutral shoe type of experience underneath your foot. It's not to say that they're not stable or supportive, but they're going about it a completely different way. So like the gap between neutral and stable shoes is shrinking. They're coming closer and closer. And then, Hoka was out here sort of really marching to their own beat with the cushion and the stack heights. And they're actually kind of dialing it back, right? Like they're a lot of the new shoes they've introduced in their lineup are not traditional shoes, but they're getting lower to the ground and they're getting not as soft. And everybody else is not everybody else, but a lot of shoes are heading in the direction that Hoka is. And I'm like, they're going to literally cross paths and end up on the opposite side of the spectrum. Be like, how did we get here? We passed each other going opposite directions. And, it's not going to happen like that, but it is interesting. Things are kind of, they're sort of contracting instead of expanding in terms of the spectrum of difference, both in terms of the amount of cushion underneath your feet and the amount of support underneath your foot. And I think it's because there is, like, you guys understand far better than I do. Like, if you have too much cushion on your foot, it's not just, I mean, I get it. When you stand up, you're like, wow, this feels great. But it's the same idea of having too soft of a mattress, right? Like, it does create all kinds of problems, and you have to counterbalance and like, not everybody is going to enjoy that. And so it's really, really trying to figure out what level of cushion, what type of experience you want to feel. And it's nice to sort of float along, especially on your slower recovery day runs, or you're feeling a little bit banged up. But it's also really nice to feel connected to the ground sometimes, right? And your body needs to be connected to the ground. That's again, I'm talking to you guys, the proprioceptive response, right? So that the brain can stabilize the head and the knee as you're moving forward is actually important. And if you have nothing but a bush ball underneath your foot, it sort of blindfolds your brain, and you can't really figure out what the heck's going on with stabilizing the rest of the body. So there is a limit to it for sure. And I feel like we're probably close to the limit.
Yeah.
Could be wrong. But
you never know.
we're near the limit of how much cushion is effective. Let's
take this a little bit in a different direction. What about the carbon plated shoes or the carbon insoles?
Yeah, I mean, so all the rage. So every manufacturer, to my knowledge, well, not every manufacturer. So certainly the vast majority of manufacturers now have a carbon plated shoe, right? And so maybe we see if we can answer this. A few questions. You could say maybe the first question might be, do they really work? Right. And I think there's no doubt at this point that they work, right? Like, there's been, there's a mountain of anecdotal evidence that it works. And there's actually some interesting research that shows that they actually work. And, I don't know, I can a lot of times things can make sense to me after the fact. I can explain them and say, of course it makes sense. It's like, Newton's third law, right? You load the plate and it springs back energy. It returns energy back to your foot. And so, whereas a bunch of foam underneath your foot, it sort of absorbs the energy. And yes, if it's, the better foams do a better job of returning the energy, but nothing like a carbon plate. All you have to do is put a carbon plate on the ground, stand on it, and literally feel like it almost springs you upwards. And you're like, oh, okay, I get where that might be useful. And then you can surround it with, some real nice foam that is both soft, but also does a good job with energy return. And lo and behold, you've got a really fast shoe. Those shoes, it would maybe 2 years ago, everything was in the $250 range. So it was pretty exotic. There's not that many people that are going to spend $250 on a shoe. I get if you're on the cusp of qualifying for the Boston Marathon and you just need to find that extra minute or two, and like, you've got a coach and you've got your massage therapist and you're all in on this. Yes, you should absolutely get the $250, $275 shoe. It's totally worth it. But for the average runner, that's kind of like, that doesn't make any sense. But I do think you're going to see a trickle down into the shoes. And I think, if you really looked at some of the big trends today, so obviously, stack height, which is the height off the ground, stack height and cushion tend to go hand in hand, though not always directly hand in hand. But so stack height and cushion are two trends that have been around for a little while now. You would get into rockered midsoles, which really helps you with that transition forward. Not everybody likes it. Some people feel unstable in a rockered midsole, but in general, if you've got a lot of cushion underneath your foot, the rockered midsole, and I always tell you, think of a rocking chair. So rocks back and forth, but not as dramatic, hopefully, as a rocking chair. And that's what rolls you forward, gets you through all that cushion, so it doesn't feel like you're running through soft sand. So those are three sort of semi-obvious trends. The plates, I believe, are the next area where, the goal is to make running easier. And sometimes I'll liken it to, let's look at cycling, right? And in cycling, e-bikes are super popular right now. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a purist, you might be like, I just don't like, this seems like sacrilegious, right? How can you do an e-bike? But e-bikes have made cycling accessible to a much broader population. And, who can argue with that, right? They shouldn't be legal for races. And, if you're going up a hill and you're grinding it out and somebody's cruising by on an e-bike, you might get a little frustrated by that. And I get it. But if you say, look, more people are going to go out and ride their bikes because it's easier, it's just more accessible to them. Like, that's hard to argue against making that sport or that activity more accessible. Let's call it activity. The sport should probably be strictly not e-bikes, but the activity itself of cycling, e-bikes, great. Accessibility, great. So if you apply the same line of thinking to running, it's like, well, the biggest thing we hear people say is, I love running when it's done. I wish I just didn't hate it while I was doing it. I say, well, why do you hate it while you're doing it? Well, it's hard, it's clunky, it's awkward. So, if you can make running easier, then you make it more accessible. And, again, you're kind of trotting on some of the purists and saying, look, technology and products are going to take the essence of running out of running. I get it. I mean, if we were all going to be purists, the Olympics would be run barefoot and we'd go, we wouldn't have anything like that. So it's a complicated road, but I do, look, we're for promoting and growing the pedestrian active lifestyle. So we're for making running easier. And I think taking those carbon plates, and whether it's carbon or some other type of material, not carbon, so some type of plastic, which can help propel forward, coupled with a rocker bottom, coupled with a little bit more cushion underneath the foot, is an interesting idea. Does it work? Certainly not all the time. There's no shortage of people that have had a bad experience. It's no different than anything else, where it's all an experiment of one. What works for your friend or for your coach or for your PT does not necessarily work for you, or for your running store fitting person. Does not mean that works for you. But I do think that is a direction where it will be heading, and it is heading. And I think you'll see that trickling down into more products that aren't at the $200 price range, that are maybe in the $150 range, and maybe even to the $130 range, which starts getting pretty accessible.
Yeah. It's interesting about the whole e-bike and the making everything accessible, because prior to my heart condition, I was a purist 100%. Like, no, you cannot ride a bike that has a battery. And what do you mean you're going to make it easier? Let's make it harder. And, oh, you only want to run 5 hill repeats? I want to run 25. Now that all that has been taken away and I'm not allowed to do it anymore, I own an e-bike because I just want to be outside. Part of the joy I learned later. So, hindsight is 2020, that what I really love about exercise is just being outdoors and being active and moving. And so even though I can't do the things I used to do, I now have my e-bike that I ride to work, and it's hilarious because I've got like this white hat. It's a white bike.
So hilarious. I love rolling up to the Serenbe Clinic and seeing Kate's white bike and helmet outside.
Oh my God. I would have made fun of myself previously in another life, like hardcore made fun. But the truth is now I get it. I finally get it. Like, make it accessible to everybody. And if I couldn't have the battery, I wouldn't be able to do it now.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting story. I also think, for me, also age, right? I mean, age is a humbling event. And so, when you realize that, if I'm going to keep doing this, it can't just be about the competitive side of it. And then you realize that, I just want to enjoy it actually when it, I mean, look, we'd all love to be like our best selves. I'd love to be going out chasing PRs. That would be awesome, but that's not going to happen. So it's like, okay, if that's stripped away, I want to enjoy it. And I think, there's an amazing number of people, 60s, 70s, even 80s now, that are doing things that just would have been inconceivable 20 years ago, 30 years ago, certainly 50 years ago. And it's really inspiring. But I see nothing wrong with taking advantage of we'll call them cheat codes to help you get back to experiencing some semblance of what you remember it being. And so yeah. I think that's it. So, shoes can make a difference. But look, I would be remiss to say, like, strength training and flexibility.
Oh my God. Thank you. I was wondering when we were going to get there.
We say this all the time. It's like, because the shoe always gets blamed and credited
all the time. For injuries, for success, for everything. It's always the shoes.
It's like, yeah, it's always like, no, it's not. It's not the shoes. It's not always the shoe's fault. It is sometimes the shoe's fault. And when people come in and say, I ran in my new shoe and it gave me all kinds of pain, and I put my old shoe that has 400 miles on it and it felt fine, I'm like, okay, that's the shoe's fault. I'm totally there with you. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So balance, flexibility, core strength, like it actually really, really makes a difference. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, yoga.
It makes a huge difference. And I just have to bring up the fact that today I got a text message from Kacy with this picture of, will you hold it up so Steve can see it? I'm so sorry our audience can't see this, but I think
it'll show up somewhere.
Is it a unicorn? It's upside down.
Oh,
it's upside down. It's a unicorn doing a squat
too, but
and it says, because nobody raps about little butts. You know, I like big butts and I cannot lie. Nobody. So this poster, she texted me and said, is this appropriate for my office?
I just needed to know.
So yes, strength training is very important. It does.
For a lot of reasons, apparently.
It's all about the butt, Steve.
Yeah. If you want to be in the next rap hit.
Whatever motivates you, it's not very sexy to say you will run a little bit more smoothly and you will be less likely to feel banged up if you do this, or you could just have a nice butt.
That's right. I like to tell people the fact that they'll actually burn more calories if they have more muscle mass. So people like that too, which is true. So if they don't want to do the strength training, I'm like, look, you want to burn more calories, get stronger.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to use that probably tomorrow.
Yes, you should.
Yes. Come to the strength training side. I was going to say the dark side, but it's not the dark side over here. It's definitely
it's definitely not the dark side over here. I mean, most runners who, again, it's more of an acceptance thing. Like you get older and you get banged up and then somebody finally tells you, look, like this is what you need to do. And then you're like, okay, well, if I want to keep doing something I love, like I've got to start doing this. But the sooner you do it, the better, of course. A good friend of mine, Paul Wakeman, who I have learned an incredible amount about just life in general, but running as well. And he used to work at Big Peach. He's a professor at Kennesaw State now, but he and I run regularly still. And he used to say that, running, there are three things that running does to your body, and two of them are bad. But it was a nice oh my gosh, wake up to you saying that one of the things that running does is it shortens the muscles, right? I mean, they get tight. Otherwise, you're just going to become this high strung, injury prone bomb that's going to go off, and you've got to elongate those muscles. And by the way, the whole two of the things running does is bad for you was just, it is a wake up call to say you've got to do something beyond just running.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, Steve, I think that covered a lot of what we were really hoping our audience would get to hear from you tonight. And I think we could keep going, but I do want to at least get close to closing it down, because it's, Kacy's bedtime and certainly mine soon.
It's my bedtime right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'm with you. Thank you guys. Y'all are amazing for what you do for the running community. We appreciate your efforts every day. When the shoe can't fix it, then somebody in your profession maybe is the go-to that keeps people going out there, whether it's walking or running or who knows what else.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. And we appreciate you so much. And I've learned so much from you over the years. And I love that we keep getting to do things like this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I learn a lot every time I talk to you guys. So it's great.
Yeah, same. I always learn a lot talking to you too, Steve. So it's been great.
Where can people find you guys?
So you can go to our website, bigpeachrunningco.com. There's 7 locations throughout the Atlanta area. I won't go through all of them. You can find them all on our website. And we have a mobile unit, which has spent a fair amount of time down with you guys at Serenbe.
I know. I begged, and I'm so glad that they come.
Yeah. It's a cool, it's literally a food truck.
It is a food truck.
Like it's literally a food truck. It's the exact same truck they use for food trucks. It's just for running shoes.
It's great. And it makes everybody happy. Yeah. When they come down.
It's good. But yeah, we're around and 7 days a week. And so we say, obviously want to take good care of people, and we pride ourselves on product knowledge, but we say if there's only one thing we would be known for, it would be to be the friendliest place on the planet. Disney can have happiest place on earth if Big Peach can take friendliest place on the planet.
That's awesome.
So we take what we do seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. So hopefully it's always a fun experience.
Every time I go in there, I have a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, same.
That's good. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Thanks.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
If you love this podcast, please show us some love and write us a review. We're totally serious. Write us a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It really helps us to increase the visibility of our show and reach more endurance athletes everywhere.
And remember that training is so much more than miles.
See you later.
See you later.